get going. Episode 6 of Undertaking the Colts. I can't believe we are already 6 episodes into this. This has been a fun ride. I'll tell you what, JB. Um, Man, time just keeps flying by. But I know we're starting off kind of off topic here. So I'm just going to change it up real quick and get into some Baltimore Ravens stuff. Now, I wanted to start this off kind of on a bit of a comic note. And what I mean by this is that okay, so anybody that has a history or background knowledge of football, specifically the Indianapolis Colts' franchise history, knows that Bob Irsay decided that it was a great idea to up and move the Indianapolis Colts, well, excuse me, then the Baltimore Colts, in the middle of the night via Mayflower Moving Company to Indianapolis. That story has been said time and time and time again. And to this day, we are almost at the 40-year anniversary. It'll be 40 years, I believe, like November, or no, not November, January or February of 2024, actually. So we're coming up on in a couple months. The reason I bring that up is that we, the Indianapolis Colts, are going to Baltimore. And every time the Colts go to Baltimore, they refuse to display the name Colts on the scoreboard, like on the big jumbotron there, or any electronic scoreboard throughout the stadium. And I find it extremely A, funny, and B, beyond petty to this day because I really don't, because the majority of the fans I really don't think care anymore. It's probably just some old geezer running the front office operations or sitting in the like at the scores table or something, pushing buttons, who's still holds a grudge for whatever reason 40 years later. I just find it completely pathetic and petty and whatnot. But hey, fan is short for fanatic, and we're all crazy. It's fine. Um, but anyway, that's kind of my beginning tangent. JB, I want you. Go ahead.
Well, I want to jump in there. I want to jump in there real quick because I would argue I do think there is some hatred there, and even some from the
But
younger generation.
why?
Now it's very, I know, but it's very much one sided. It's the Ravens hate the Colts. It's I
Is it
think
the
if you
Ravens
took
or
a
is it the
poll,
city of Baltimore in that community?
it could be both. But I mean, I've heard stories of friends of mine going out to games in Baltimore, and they're driving in and they got Colts flags on their car, and people are throwing eggs at their car and stuff like that. I mean,
Yikes.
they hate us out there. So I just wanted to point that out. I do think there is some hatred still, and it's very funny to me because it's so one
Hmm.
sided. I mean, I guess it's a rivalry. I recognize it as somewhat of a rivalry, but I think if you took a poll of the entire Colts fan base and asked them who
I don't
our
even think
biggest
they make
rival
top
is,
five.
I think it's very clearly, I would say, the Patriots. I don't know if it is as much anymore as it used to
Right.
be, obviously, but in our minds it is. I hate the Patriots more than anybody else. If you ask the Patriots, they'd probably say the Bills or the Dolphins or
Hmm.
something. But I think,
And you kind of and you could
you're right. The Ravens, I don't even know if they make the top five
top seven,
for
eight. I mean,
us.
you can go on and on, but like you bring up a good point with the Patriots because I still think to this day, even though after 2 years ago when Jonathan Taylor decided, or what was it, last year, year before, whenever it was that Jonathan Taylor just sealed that game, and it was one of the most beautiful calls I've ever listened to on TV. Um,
That was one of my favorite games I've been at live. I saw that whole thing. Granted, it was a Saturday
yes, it
night
was,
game,
wasn't
so many beverages were had. I had a hotel downtown, so
it?
I do. Sometimes I got to watch, the highlights to remember everything, but I do remember that run by
Oh,
Taylor.
I'm pretty certain. Oh, English is so hard. I'm so sorry. I'm pretty certain that I watched that replay on YouTube and on the Colts website at least 70, 80 times, just over and over again.
I'm right there with you, man. And it was awesome for multiple reasons. I mean, it was vindication for 10 years of basically getting our butts
Yep.
whooped by the Patriots, and sometimes in hilarious fashion with the infamous fake punt snap
Oh
situation,
no,
that kind of stuff.
flashbacks.
So it was like 10 years of built up. We just had to let it all out there, and I so I would I watched the highlights a ton on YouTube, but I also went back and listened to Matt Taylor's call of that play a million
Uh-huh.
times because
Yes.
you could hear it in his voice. Like that was as close as he's come to like the old Bob Lamy calls, where it's just unglued out of his
Bob
seat,
is a legend in his own
But
right.
see, here we are. We've talked for 3 minutes about the Patriots rivalry, and so that tells you everything you need to know about the supposed rivalry
Well, I
between the
think that
Ravens and the
almost every
Colts.
team in the NFL has a, something like that to where, one fan base in particular just cannot stand another team. And then that said team that's being hated on just pretty much chews them off like a piece of lint out of the dryer.
Right.
Um, but hey, it is what it is.
Bears and Bears and Packers right now. That's the Bears hate the Packers more than anybody else, and it's because the Packers are the giant shoe that steps on them as an ant every twice
It
a year
Yeah,
every
it really
year.
do be like that even after Aaron Rodgers left. But okay,
Yeah.
let's get into some Colts football. So games kicking off at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time in Baltimore, as we have established. And um, big storyline going into this game. We are going to be without our starting quarterback, Anthony Richardson, and we're going to be without our starting center, Ryan Kelly, both of whom were being held out as they could not pass the concussion protocol this week. Neither one of them practiced any day this week. Um, so it's really going to be interesting to see how Gardner Minshew steps in at quarterback and then Wesley French takes over at center. And overall, in terms of the health of Richardson and Kelly, one's got to think that either A, this is a complete overabundance of caution, or B, and this is where I sit, is that there's legit lingering concussion systems, whether it just be headaches or when they started to do, a little bit of exertion going through the concussion protocol, which, let me clear this up real quick for those listening. The NFL's concussion protocol does not differentiate between if a doctor, a staff member, or you yourself exclude yourself from the game. So the concussion protocol, it is what it is, baseline, no ifs, ands, or buts. So obviously, they weren't able to progress, therefore, they're not playing, which we established last podcast episode that I'm completely okay with. And, let them get rest, get healthy, and make sure that we're not going to be, you know, introducing them into even more risky situations where, they may still have some symptoms and they may have some lingering effects and possibly make it worse.
Yeah, I mean, I have thoughts on both players really, and I think you're right. It's probably a mix of both things of what you said. An abundance of caution, but also odds are, I mean, it's difficult to recover from concussion if you truly did not pass the
Hmm.
concussion test. It's difficult to come back the next week. I think Drew Ogletree was able to because it seemed like they kind of held him out for an abundance of caution, but he actually probably could have came back in that game
Right.
against the Jaguars. So he's kind of the exception to the rule there. I think there's two different kind of schools of thought for me here. I think even if Anthony Richardson was able to go this week, I think you still
I would have agreed with that
hold him out
100%.
because I think that's your franchise, right? Like
Hmm.
that's the guy, and you don't even want to mess with that. If he needs 3 weeks, he needs 3 weeks. This is all about a year of getting him comfortable in the NFL. Now, on the other hand, with Ryan Kelly, I think it's kind of I'm in the same boat where even if he was able to come back and play, I think I'd probably give him an extra week off because I would argue as an offensive lineman, you are probably going to have just as many opportunities, if not more than some other players, to have head injuries because you're constantly banging your helmet right up against somebody
Hmm.
out across from you. You know, Wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, they take vicious hits from time to time, but they're not doing it
Right.
every single play like you are on the offensive line. So again, abundance of caution on both accounts. I think that's the right move where we have the capability to come into Baltimore and put up a fight, but these two guys playing or not playing is not going to make or break this
No, I
season for
agree.
us. So I think we have to think
Yeah.
about the future.
And, to kind of put a bow on this, it's again, it's only week 3, and this is our second road test already. We're going into a hostile environment. Baltimore is always tough to play, and especially this weekend when it's basically going to be a monsoon all weekend because of the tropical storm coming in. Um, playing on a wet field in adverse territory in even worse conditions, it's like there's no point. There really isn't. And player safety is number one overall, and it always should be. Um, Getting into the actual Baltimore Ravens and what we're going to be going up against. So, game expectations. Overall, too, against this team, Baltimore is tough. Baltimore has a good amount of blended youth with veterans, and they have depth. They have depth quite a few places. And John Harbaugh's been there for 15 years now, give or take. And, so his program is well established. They have leaders there. They have really a defensive tradition too. And I it's going to be a tough battle no matter which way you put it. And I don't know. Like you said, the Colts could come in and put up a fight, but I'm really not expecting to come away with much. How about you?
No, I'm not either. I think there is a crack in the door for the Colts in this game because the Ravens are dealing with just as many injuries as the
If not
Colts. I
more,
mean,
yeah.
if not more. Well, they are physically dealing with more, but in terms of key players, just as much, if
Hmm.
not more. We were kind of chit chatting back and forth earlier today. Ronnie Stanley being out, he's one of the most premier left tackles in the game. So again, that's 2 weeks in a row that we're going against a team that has their best offensive lineman out of the game. And I think that really, that opens up the opportunity for the Colts to take advantage of that. So I'll be curious to see, how they scheme against, a backup left tackle, that's on Lamar Jackson's blind side. So I think there are opportunities for the Colts to show up to this weekend, but my expectations are very low.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And even so, if you're somebody who gambles and you're going off of the betting line, and right now the Colts are 8-point underdogs. I believe they opened this game at like 8.5 or 9-point underdogs at the conclusion of last week's game. And it's it went down to like 7.5, I think almost 7 flat on some places. And with the announcement of Richardson and Kelly, it's back up to 8-point underdogs. In terms of total points scored, it's calling over under 44. So I fully expect this to be a low scoring game, and it sounds like Vegas does too, especially with the weather conditions. I really don't even think that these teams will break 30, if you want my honest opinion. Um, Both defenses are really good, though. And getting into the Baltimore Ravens, this was supposed to be the touted matchup of the two premier athletic quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Or, we'll just dumb it down and go to the AFC. And everyone knows how fast, twitchy, and athletic Lamar Jackson is. But I want to touch in on his passing real quick. He's 41 of 55 on the year for about a 75% completion percentage. For you haters out there that say he's a running back playing quarterback, I'd like to see somebody go out there and try and complete nearly 75% of their passes. I have mad respect for the work that Lamar Jackson has put into his passing game and his field awareness too, because he's made some really tight throws over the last couple of years. He's made some good reads, and he's really just found a way to win when he's healthy. And there's that right there is also the big, you know, if you will, key point with Lamar Jackson is can he stay healthy for a full season? And what can he do in a full season? So, with that being said, crappy weather, still got Lamar Jackson to contend with. Um, I really don't think we're going to see much in the passing game at all from both sides of the ball. And what we do will probably be short to very light intermediate routes. I don't think we're going to see deep shots. I don't think we're going to see any risky crossing routes across the middle because they may footing slip, cause injury. This will probably be one of those games that you check in every now and then to look at the score. If you're not a diehard fan, right, you just check the score and move on.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something that you mentioned with Lamar. I mean, his completion percentage is great. Beyond that, though, his stats so far this year really don't jump off the page. I mean, I think he has like 400 yards passing through 2 games, which is good, not
Hmm.
crazy good. And what I think is interesting about this season so far for them is, granted, they had a cakewalk in week 1, right? But last week they gritted out a win against the Bengals, and I think what I noticed in watching some of the highlights from both games, I think at times in the past, Lamar Jackson has really forced the issue with the ball in his hands. He feels compelled to make a play, whether it be with his legs or rolling out, getting out of the pocket. What I noticed so far this year is he's stayed really consistent with, staying in the pocket
Hmm.
as long as he can. They're relying on the run game. So I feel like, the Ravens are really just gritting out some of these games and really just kind of, it's almost like we talked about a few episodes ago with Frank Reich. Their sort of strategy so far has been like ground and pound, death by 1,000 cuts,
Yeah.
sort of. Obviously their passing game was way more, opened up in the Texans game because I think we've learned that the Texans stink. But you know, I as long as we don't let him get hot throwing the ball, which it sounds like will be very difficult this week due to the weather conditions, there's an opportunity to contain him. But that being said, you have to really stay focused on the defensive side of the ball and keep him contained because he has the ability to make an explosive play at any point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you mentioned their running game, and the quarterback run is a big part of their offense still. I think Lamar is still running it about 10 to 12 times a game. Uh, they're down J.K. Dobbins, who's unfortunately out for the year. I believe he has a torn ACL or popped his Achilles, one of the two. And then their third string running back, Justice Hill, has already been ruled out of the game as well. So that leaves them, I think, um, Gus Edwards, thank you.
Gus Edwards.
And they're probably going to call somebody up from the practice squad to be the number two running back, unless their game plan is centered around zero or single backfield. Um, but
Right. Well,
go
and
for
this,
it.
and then sorry to interrupt you, but no, with Gus Edwards, this is a dream game for him because he's a power runner. So
Yes.
this is 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of game with the rain and everything. So, I had that on here as a matchup to keep our eye on because he is an effective runner inside the tackles, and the Colts defensive line. To your point, last episode, Buckner and Grover are playing 90 something percent of the snaps in the interior. It feels like so. We're really going to have to reinforce the middle of the defensive line and make sure that we slow him down as best we can because this could be a kind of game for him to really exploit, our
Yeah, and
defense.
that kind of gateways into a couple of questions and couple of thoughts that I've had. Um, so starting off with containing Lamar, as you were saying, you mentioned last week about putting a QB spy on him, which the Colts have done in the last 3-4 meetings that we played him, and it's been very effective. But here's where that caveat is that spy has been a healthy Shaquille Leonard in past games. We've established that our opinion is we still don't think that Shaq is not even 70-75% right now in terms of his explosiveness and his attacking the open holes and the open ball carrier. I don't see that explosiveness, and somebody who could fill in that gap is EJ Speed, who I mentioned last week, because we saw his burst coming through. I think it was an A or a B gap blitz last week and just leveled CJ Stroud, and it happened in less than a second and a half. Um, so I think you take your fastest, healthiest linebacker, which at this point is EJ Speed, and keep him on the field consistently. And this, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if we see EJ Speed more or less start at Shaq's will linebacker position, which he's played before in Gus Bradley's scheme. And EJ Speed just has Lamar all cover number what's Lamar's number 8? Yeah, cover number 8 all game. Um,
Yeah,
that could be something we see.
I agree. I agree completely with. I'm 100% on board. I think EJ Speed's the guy to be the spy. That being said, if 1 o'clock rolls around on Sunday and we see on the first drive that the Ravens have the ball, that Shaq is the spy, then I think that tells us that Gus Bradley and Shane Steichen feel more comfortable about where Shaq's at and where he's getting back to than maybe what we're seeing, through the first two
Yeah,
games.
I
You know
can
what I
see that
mean?
too. And I personally don't think Shaq's really been tested too much yet. Granted, he has, he's made a few plays and he's put some, a few numbers in the box score. Granted, last week I think all he had was about 3 tackles, which is not impressive at a linebacker position in the NFL. But I mean, box scores don't really tell the story of the game, if you will. And historically, Shaq has done an amazing job as the QB spy. I go back to the playoff game when we had Philip Rivers at quarterback. I think it was, or no, not that one. That we played Buffalo and lost. Um, I'm trying to remember what year that was. It may have been. It was their rookie season. It was Shaq's rookie season in 2018, the last year that we had Andrew Luck, and we played Baltimore in the first round of the playoffs, or the second round, excuse me, because we beat Houston in the first round. And Shaq was on Lamar all game. And I mean, Lamar had his carries and had some yards just because of the plethora of carries and chances that he had. But Shaq limited those huge plays for the most part, and that will be a telltale story to where you know it needs to be determined on the first drive, and I think we will see it. Who exactly is that QB spy? And if it does end up being EJ Speed, how many plays is Shaq going to be out? Because the Colts' base defense, if you will, is a cover three with a nickel. And that means only 2 linebackers on the field. And you're not taking Zaire Franklin off, right? I mean, he's got the franchise record already this
Right.
season for most tackles in the first 2 games of a season. He's got he set the franchise record in tackles last year, and he almost set, I think, the record for tackle for losses as well. So you're not Zaire's not leaving the field. Period. Dot. The end. So it's going to be a really interesting balance to see how they play defensively against Lamar, and especially to last kind of point here. Sorry, I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but playing Gus's true scheme, which is you play the run on your way to the quarterback. I think you really have to adjust that here because of A, the dynamic ability of Lamar Jackson, and B, you're going up against a much more talented team than we were against Houston, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's what it's funny that the Ravens and the Colts have both played the Texans so far. So it's almost like we can wash those two games
Yeah.
because I think that was the Texans. They stink, but no, I mean you bring up a great point with Shaq and where does he get on the field? And personally, I think we might see him. If that is EJ Speed's role to kind of spy on Lamar in this game, I think we might see Shaq maybe in more on third down and long or something like that. Where it's less likely for a design QB run situation. Because Shaq is great
Hmm.
in pass coverage, and nobody turns the ball over better than him with his the peanut punch and everything like that. So that might be how they choose to play it, but it'll be interesting for sure to see what the defensive approach is because if there was ever like a better matchup for Gus Bradley defense, I think it's a game like this because his mantra almost is like
Yeah.
bend don't break, and this is the exact kind of offense, especially when they're down a few key players, that they're going to get yardage because they have a quarterback who can exploit two different phases of the game very effectively. So It's let them get their chunks, then hold them to a field goal or stop them before they get into field goal range is really going to be the key you know to this defense on Sunday.
For sure. So also too, now that let's kind of transition into the secondary because Baltimore is going to be missing a key receiver. Odell Beckham Jr. will not be playing in this game. Granted, he's not, in my personal opinion, he's not the Odell Beckham Jr. that he used to be in terms of explosiveness and in terms of the deep threat that he was with the Giants, right? So with our young secondary, and Daryl Baker Jr. has had his struggles a little bit on the outside, um, but the two biggest pass catching options for Lamar that we're going to have to defend mightily. The number one, public enemy number one in the passing game is tight end Mark Andrews. Uh, I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but I want to say Mark Andrews receives anywhere from 25% to a third of Lamar Jackson's targets. And
He's got the second most targets on the year for the
he's
Ravens
only,
at 8
mind you,
so
he's
far.
only played one game.
Yeah.
So I fully expect the ball to go his way and for them to try and exploit the middle of the field, especially if Shaq's paired up on him in pass coverage. We could see that matchup being a huge, huge key into this game because Mark Andrews is second only behind Travis Kelce in terms of tight end abilities in the passing game in the NFL, in my opinion. And he's also a good blocker in the run game. He's your do it all tight end. He's what you want. So that'll be a very interesting matchup to see. And then Kenny Moore on Zay Flowers in the slot. I believe Zay leads the team in targets and receptions, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah, 13 receptions
okay,
and 15 targets.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
pretty good.
shoot, that's like a 92, 93% catch percentage, if you will. So we'll see how that matches up. I wouldn't be shocked to see Kenny Moore shadowing Zay Flowers. Um, I know you've got everything pulled up right now in front of you. What's the receiving core like, and what are you kind of expecting in their passing game?
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring it. I mean, I had the exact kind of flow, marked out on my notes that you just mentioned because it's kind of interesting. Obviously, OBJ at this point is not the OBJ that we remember from 7 years ago or whatever. He's kind of a brand name that maybe isn't having the same level of production. That being said, he does have the second most reception yards in their receiving core. So beyond that, they have Nelson Aguilar, who's right behind him, but then Rashad Bateman, who so far in his Ravens career, I think has been pretty much a
Yep.
bust by their standards. And then obviously Mark Andrews, who, like you said, only played one game. So I do think the as much as the OBJ injury may seem like it's like, he's not what he used to be. I do think it impacts their receiving core more than we may realize because Zay Flowers, a lot of his success so far in the two games that they've played have been these quick passes in the flat, or screen passes, and you know they may not have the ability, to exploit that as much. And OBJ has always been a pretty good blocker as well. So there's different facets to this. It may seem like a meaningless injury in some respects because he doesn't flash the way he used to, but I do think it could definitely play in the favor of the Colts if it makes it easier, to key in on Flowers and Andrews, who are by far their two best, you know, playmakers in the receiving side of the game. So I think it'll be interesting for sure. You know, so I know you're really high on Mark Andrews. I know he's an elite player, but if there's a defense, linebacking core that can kind of take away the middle of the field, from what I've seen so far, and granted, again, we're washing away the Texans, but even against the Jaguars, I mean, from what I remember in that game, Evan Ingram's biggest play of the game was on the
Yep.
outside of the field. He
Yeah,
actually
outside of
beat
the
a corner.
numbers.
So I think so far, our linebackers have taken away the middle of the field from tight ends. Granted, like you said, Andrews is going to be the best one we face to date, but can they continue to take away the middle of the field and maybe make him even less of a threat, thus putting even more pressure on Flowers? So I think that injury to OBJ could prove to be, more costly to the Ravens than it might seem.
Yeah, and so I mean that would make if they're in a three receiver set, that would put Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar on the outside, which historically, as you mentioned, they're both extremely inconsistent. Now, granted, when they are on, I mean they've got speed; they can get vertical real quick. But I mean, I know there's questions with their hands, with their route running abilities, and just their ability to find that soft spot. Now, Nelson Aguilar's been in the league for a little while, so he does have a little bit of veteran savvy to him, but he's not somebody that, I'm going to go to bed and worry about. Whereas,
Yeah.
rookie Zay Flowers is already showing some pretty decent potential. And,
Yeah.
I personally think if we can contain both Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews and keep the middle of the field closed, then that's going to really hinder their passing ability.
Well, and that arguably it might be the biggest knock on Lamar is his ability to throw outside the numbers. And if we can force, those plays to funnel outside and take away the middle of the field from Andrews to just be able to sit there and, catch those 10, 12, 15-yard chunk plays. If we can force Lamar into throwing the ball on the outside to these wide receivers who frankly we've alluded to that they're fairly inconsistent, extremely inconsistent, really. Nelson Aguilar, his career in Philadelphia was very inconsistent, and then Bateman hasn't done much so far. So, forcing Lamar to make his most difficult throw to guys who aren't, the best receivers that you're going to see all year, you could force
Yeah,
some mistakes. So I definitely think that has to be the game plan.
for sure. And then so that also kind of leads into the point to where we do take away the passing game, and the Colts have, I believe, the sixth or the seventh best run defense in terms of yards per carry allowed in the NFL. So if we can shut down the pass game and really hone in on containing Lamar and Gus Edwards and the running game as a whole, then this would hope that our defensive line would be able to take advantages of the injuries up front, because it's not just Ronnie Stanley that's missing. They're going to be missing their their starting center, Tyler Linderbaum, and missing center and missing left tackle. Those are your two most important cogs on the offensive line. That to me is the beginning recipe for a feast for the defensive line.
Well, and with the speed that Samson Ebukam showed last week, if he can beat a backup left tackle off the edge, and then you've got, a backup center going head to head with DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart every play, then, you know, like I said, it's going to be very interesting in that interior offensive defensive line on really both sides of the ball for both teams, But even, with the Colts defense there, it's going to be, can they contain Gus Edwards? Can that center, the backup center, get push? I find it unlikely with Grover and Defoe, but Gus Edwards is a hard guy
Mm-hmm.
to tackle. I mean, I was watching some of those even for the Bengals game, just watching some of those plays. It's like it almost runs like Derrick Henry. I mean, he is
Yeah,
very
he
difficult to
reminds
tackle.
me a
So
lot. His running style, because Derrick Henry does actually have some speed to him, but if you, for
yeah,
me at least, if you want to compare him to a back of days past, very much reminds me of a Brandon Jacobs from the Giants.
yeah.
Doesn't, probably runs maybe a 4.55, 4.6, but good luck tackling him within the first 3 yards without getting 2, 3 defenders drug with him. Okay. I do overall, I like the defensive matchup. I don't love it, but I like it. And that leads us into the flip side where our offense is going to be missing some pieces. And as we established with Kelly being out, with Richardson being out, it leaves Wesley French, Gardner Minshew, and company to take on a Ravens defense that so far up to this year, I haven't been extremely impressed with, but it's the Baltimore Ravens and a John Harbaugh defense. I am never going to take anything for granted or bet against them, but historically the Colts, for whatever reason, have played a John Harbaugh Ravens club very, very well, and have been able to exploit several different instances, different levels of the game, whether it's the rushing attack, mid pass, short pass, or even the long routes. Now, as we established, the weather is not going to be great for any sort of deep passing game. It may be. It may just be a cloudy day and it may just be a little bit of wet. And that could open up the game. But I'm not expecting that to be a thing. So, where do you think, in terms of the Colts offense as a whole, how's our matchup looking up against the Ravens defense?
So, I think just right off the bat, I think the biggest matchup that I took away from, reviewing both our games and their games is I think we saw our offense open up so much against the Texans because of the usage of our tight ends and our ability, our tight ends' ability to get open in space, effective screen passes, tight end screen passes, open on the second level of the defense. What I find interesting is Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith have combined for 40 tackles through the first two games, and they lead the team by a
Yep.
extensive margin. Little footnote in there: Zaire Franklin has 30 by himself,
You just had to
but
throw it in there, didn't you?
but still, they are extremely capable linebackers that take up space in the middle of the field. Very good at stopping the run. Very
Hmm.
good in coverage. So I think my key, matchup here between our offense and their defense is can our extremely athletic tight ends get those little chunk plays like we saw, that one last week where Kylan Granson actually dropped it. It was kind of a crappy pass from Richardson, but those kind of plays where it's like 10, 12 yards, just past the sticks, chunk plays, can we continue to utilize our athleticism at that position group and get open down the field? Or, are Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith really going to shut that down as well as try to take away the run game? So I think that really hinges on the success because, as we alluded to on the last episode, from what we saw with Gardner Minshew on last Sunday, he came in and did as good of a job as you can ask for a
Hmm.
backup quarterback. That being said, he doesn't have the mobile facet of the game like Anthony Richardson. He's capable of moving, but that's not 50% of his game. And so he's really going to have to rely on the receivers to get open, the running game to open up. Otherwise, he's going to get teed off on in the backfield. So I really think that matchup between the tight ends and the linebackers is really intriguing to me because I think it really could unlock. There's a difference between unlocking, a wide open offense for the Colts to be able to move the ball or really struggling with three and outs and having a difficult time moving the ball down the
Yeah,
field.
and I think that will be the key. One of the big keys to this game is which offense can sustain drives and eat clock off or eat seconds off of that clock. Excuse me. In terms of me personally, in terms of our passing game, you know, Gardner Minshew excels at timing and rhythm. Right, as you mentioned, he's not gonna look to get out and run for 20, 25 yards. Um, But then that also brings up to the point to where, so the Ravens play a 3-4 defense, meaning three down defensive linemen, four linebackers. The two middle linebackers, Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith, are your street sweepers, if you will. If you will, they clean up everything that's lying around. But then you got your two rush linebackers, which act as defensive ends. I gotta look into it a little bit more, but historically, the way that a 3-4 defense is played, you have a strong side outside linebacker and a weak side outside linebacker. And depending on the coverage you call, either strong side or weak side will come in on a rush and the other one will drop back into coverage. Or if you're calling kind of like a blitz, both of them will come. Those two players for Baltimore are Tyus Bowser and Jadeveon Clowney. And we know Clowney all too well from his years with Houston. Uh, he's lost a step or two over the last few years, in my opinion, but it's still Jadeveon Clowney. He's 30 years of age. He's been in this league for several years now. He's got savvy to him. He's got all the pass rush moves that you want. Um, and this is where I'm going to really hone in on both Bernard Ryman and Braden Smith keeping up their really good play in the pass protection, as well as the run game. So again, in the run game, this is where having Ryan Kelly out as your commander in chief of the offensive line in favor of the first NFL start for Wesley French. French is going to really have to lean on Q and even Will Fries, who's done extremely well at the right guard, and you just hope that the synergy still remains, and their nose tackle just doesn't keep you know throwing French back 2 to 4 yards in the backfield and spoiling any chance of a run game.
Yeah, we don't want to see the Baltimore defensive line, eat up the French fries combo. Uh, that's going to spell for a bad day. But no, so one point to something that you mentioned, Clowney. He did show up on the injury report this week. Now he was listed as healthy, like he's going to play, but that could be a factor if he's not, if he's playing, but maybe he's not playing 100%. Could be something to keep an eye on. I'm not really sure which side, if he's going towards Braden or Bernard, but
Normally,
um, could be an interesting
yeah,
keep an
and
eye on
so
there.
normally in a 3-4 defense, the linebackers will switch. You'll have the designated strong guy will go to the field or the wide field side, and then your weak side outside linebacker will go to the narrow or the near side. Um, so that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And if Jadeveon Clowney is on a snap count limit, then I think their next up is Malik Harrison, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and I think he's a young kid too, but obviously he's not going to have your James Harrison or your Terrell Suggs rushing ability. So I'm kind of in between on that. So their defensive backs too. Marlon Humphrey being out is massive because we know he would have shadowed Pittman pretty much all game, with Pittman being our number one. However, they do have a pretty decent stable of cornerbacks. So they have Ronald Darby, who's been in the league a minute. They've got Trayvon Mullen, who's also been around for a few years. And then, if I remember correctly, old Colts friend Rock Ya-Sin is on their roster. I am very, very interested to see what kind of cornerback wide receiver matchup our offense faces. And this is where I think size matters. And Baltimore historically has always been great at acquiring, whether it's via free agency or in the draft, corners. They always get usually pretty long, lean corners that are very, very physical at the line of scrimmage, and they're not afraid to get in your face and play you hard. Now, somebody mentions the Baltimore Ravens defense. I always think of your Ray Lewis, your Terrell Suggs, Hiloti Nata, and then, of course, the legendary ball hawk himself, Ed Reed. All these players have long since moved on, and it's not that anymore. But historically, Baltimore is a defensive culture franchise, and they're not going to roll over. They're going to play you in your face, smash you in the mouth, and challenge you to come right at them. And the Colts have done a really good job in the past several matchups of doing that. Because again, what was it, 2 years ago with Carson Wentz? We almost beat him on Monday Night Football when we had no business doing
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah, yeah. We just kind of fell apart in that game. I mean, you're right. That's the John Harbaugh, way of playing football, and it almost to me seems like they've tailored their offense to cater to their defense, and that's what I said when both of the games that they've played so far look very gritty, grinded out
Mm-hmm.
wins, and that's how they like to play. So that's I'm curious to see how the Colts offense handles that sustained just punch after punch after punch from the Ravens defense. And, if they can continue to move the ball throughout four quarters, we saw them with Anthony Richardson in week one kind of fall apart in the third quarter. Once the scripted plays started running out and we had, some struggles getting receivers open, that's music to the ears
Hmm.
of John Harbaugh and his defense. We're going to have to really come with a plan of attack, and it could be, like I mentioned earlier, start with those
Yep.
those tight ends.
And this kind of gets me into the last portion of the matchup where last year this would be Baltimore's ultimate trump card. Whereas this year, after this past offseason and free agency period, we now can stack up pretty decently. And that's the kicking game. So, as everyone knows, Justin Tucker is the place kicker of Baltimore, and he is currently the most accurate kicker in NFL history. We saw him, I think, what was it last year that he smoked a 64 or 65-yard game winner and made
Right.
it look
Right.
easy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Pat McAfee's favorite.
It would have been good from yeah, it would have been good
Oh,
from
it
75.
was it was nuked, absolutely nuked. And this is Pat McAfee's favorite kicker. And I mean, watching Justin Tucker, he's got that swag about him. He knows he's the best, hands down. It's like Adam Vinatieri in his prime. Adam knew he was the best. Um, However, and this is where we now kind of match up, is that Matt Gay, our free agent signing from the Los Angeles Rams, I believe he, if I remember correctly, is either eighth or ninth on the all-time accuracy list for place kicking. And so that nicely evens the playing field a little bit. Obviously, the edge still goes to Justin Tucker, you know, but
Right.
having a reliable kicker, especially in the type of game that we're about to go into, that could make or break it.
Yeah, and to take it even like a step back from the kicking game specifically, and I might be spoiling it here, kind of as we move into the keys to victory for the Colts. But I have as one of my keys to victory is win the special teams phase of the game. The Ravens gave up a punt return. Charlie Jones ran one back last week for the Bengals and returned a touchdown in the punting game. So, if we can exploit that, if there's some takeaways from whatever, it was, maybe it was the Ravens coverage, maybe it was something that, the Bengals threw at them. But if that's a piece of the game that we can take advantage of, that dramatically increases the Colts' capability of winning this game. And, like you said, when it comes to stacking up with kicker, nobody's better than Tucker. But now we've got somebody who we can
Yes.
rely on. And that makes a big difference. It makes those 4th and 4 on the, 38-yard line a whole lot easier of a call, than it used to be for the last 3 or 4 years as a Colts fan or a Colts coach, I guess. And, even though I wanted to be the one calling, Frank Reich like yelling at my TV, like, just kick the ball. But I mean, we couldn't rely on the
No.
kicking game. So I definitely agree. It's something to keep an eye on. And, I'm not saying the Colts have set the world on fire in the special teams game. Our game against the Jaguars, I mean, they came out with a plan to keep the ball away from, what was it? Was that returner for the punt returner for the Jaguars? I can't remember what his name is. Um, but we came out with a game plan where Rigo was trying to kick away from him, and I was complaining about it, and then I'll eat my crow as he
Yeah.
Agnew he like took the first one that we caught like 48 yards. So I'm like, all right, well, I'd shut up about that. But I think our we've got some really good playmakers on the special team side of the ball. Grant Stewart being the key one there. So if we can win special teams, I'm not saying it's going to lead to a Colts win, but it's something that they almost certainly need to have if they want to win this
Yeah,
game.
absolutely. And I agree with you, which getting into the keys to the game, I've got it several written down here. What, tell me both, I mean, in all three phases, and it doesn't even have to be, it can even be coaching, if you will. What are your keys to this game?
Yeah, I got 5 or 6 here, and I just kind of went through the special teams one, so I won't rehash that anymore. But continue to move the ball on the ground, take the momentum from the Texans game with Zach Moss, and continue to pound the ball inside the tackles with him. If we can get 3 or 4 yards of carry, that's all I'm asking for. That seems to open up our offense a whole lot more. And we were getting no push in week one, and that was killing us. So I think that's absolutely critical to the success of this offense under Minshew. Another one, jumping over to the other side of the ball, and I kind of I had my tight end group note there. I think I won't touch on that anymore. I've already kind of talked about that, but I absolutely think when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, that is critical as well. It's the running backs and the tight ends. They have to, running backs have to continue, mainly Zach Moss getting the 2 or 3 yards of carry, and then the tight ends have to get open in that soft area of the middle of the field to help open up this offense. On the other side of the ball, you know, primarily take advantage of the Ronnie Stanley injury.
Yes.
This is a great opportunity for Samson Abukum and old pal Dio Dengbo to really stamp their seal on this game. And if they can take advantage of a backup tackle and get in there and pressure Lamar and make him make some mistakes, because that's really one thing he hasn't done a whole lot this year. So make him make some mistakes, make him make some decisions by putting pressure on him, and it could lead to a whole different outcome in this game. And even in that regard, contain Lamar. Same guys, but also the edge rushers and the linebackers. You have to contain Lamar if
Yes.
you're going to win this game. There's no way fans or buts. If you let them get out and run for 60 yards, it's going to open up their passing game. You know that is a must if the Colts are going to win this game. And that's as a defense as a whole. Ben, I mentioned earlier, bend don't break. Hold them to field goals where you can. We can
Yep.
settle for that. We have the capability to score touchdowns. Last year, we did not have the capability to score touchdowns. But now we can get this offense, even with Gardner Minshew, they can pick off 2 or 3 touchdowns. If we can force field goals on the defensive side of the ball, the Colts can win this game.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's the NFL. Any given Sunday in the NFL, and you had a couple of same points that I did, so I'm not gonna rehash that. But a lot of my key points, I'll say, are a little bit more on the schematic side of the house, and I'm not I'm not even gonna really call out the secondary as one of my key points because I think the weather will take care of itself. Um, However, so on the defensive side of the ball, in terms of containing Lamar in the running game, what really needs to happen is the entire Colts D line and linebacking core needs to stay home. And what I mean by stay home is not breaking your assignment, not trying to play hero ball. So if you are the linebacker that is supposed to be crashing down, because Baltimore runs a lot of RPOs as well. So if you're the linebacker and your assignment is regardless of what the play is looking like, if your assignment is to crash down on the running back going forward, whether he has the ball or not, you do that assignment. Don't shy away from it. If you're the linebacker that's supposed to scrape that crashing defensive end on the outside to contain whether it's an outside run with a wide receiver or Lamar trying to break free, stay home, stay honest. Don't drift out of your gap. Don't overplay it, right? And continuing on the defensive side of the ball is high level linebacker play. So continuous play out of Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, Shaq Leonard. Those guys, in my opinion, need to continue playing at the level that we've started to grow accustomed to through 2 weeks of this season. Zaire needs to keep being Zaire. Eat everything up. Don't let anything get beyond 2-3 yards past the line of scrimmage, if that. Get as much as you can at the line of scrimmage or behind for a loss. But I think if we do that, if we stay in our assignments and we play fast and honest, then we can contain this Baltimore offense. And if we contain the Baltimore offense and force them to go three and out, I'd say even 3, 4 times in the first half. That is a huge success, right? Limit the first downs. Make sure to get off the field on the money down, aka third down. And even if they go for it on fourth down, again, no hero ball. Just play football, play your assignment. Everything else will take care of itself if everyone does their job. Now, offensively, I want to see Zach Moss continue, as you said, Zach Moss continue to have that sustained success, right? We don't need to see any sort of Joseph Adai dancing in the backfield. We don't need to see any sort of Trent Richardson not attacking the hole. And Zach Moss did an amazing job against a weaker Houston defense last week. Um, as for Gardner Minshew, I think Gardner Minshew's play is going to be huge for the sustainability of our offense. Now, I have full trust in Gardner. Let me just put that on record now. Minshew Mania, he's always been very precise and accurate delivering the football, and he knows where to go with the football and when to deliver it and how to deliver it. That's also a big key because Baltimore likes to play a lot of man coverage. So, if you get to a guy in the middle of the field and he's got a corner wrapped around him and you see the safety crashing down hard, then try and look off, throw it away, please throw the football away. And this is something I'd even say with Anthony Richardson as well. But I mean, I trust Gardner Minshew to make those decisions, and I think if we play a steady offensive game, don't try and get too cute, right? Because we've seen in these first couple of weeks that Shane Steichen loves his motions. He loves his fun formations, and Baltimore is a very experienced defense, and Jim Harbaugh and who's is their defensive coordinator? It's not Wink Martindale anymore, is it?
No, no, Winks and
That's
at
right.
the Giants. I don't actually remember who is the Ravens. I'll look it up right
When you
now.
find it, interrupt me and tell me who it is. But either way, Baltimore they've always played sound. Mike
Mike
McDonald, that's
McDonald.
the name that I don't really know very well.
Yeah, he was the guy. I remember this. He was the guy who was the Michigan assistant
That's
coordinator.
right. Got it.
I think
Okay.
he he went from one Harbaugh to another.
I
Can't get
guess
enough of
not.
the Harbaughs.
If only he was around for old Jack Harbaugh, their dad. Jack Harbaugh was even more hard nosed than Jim and played a tougher defense than John does.
You got to be careful not to go full Harbaugh though, because then you get stuck dealing with Tom Crean as well, because he's the brother-in-law there of Jim and John. So you get full Harbaugh, then you got to deal with Tom Crean and his wacky
Yeah.
antics.
Rule number one, don't do that. Rule number two, don't do that again. So, man, I got my train of thought all lost. Anyways, I think I made my point. Just overall, both sides of the football need to be sound, and if we can keep up in the kicking game with not miss any field goals, not miss any PATs, and precisely execute between kickoffs and punts and coverage, then the Colts have a chance to come out of Baltimore 2-1. And I don't know about you, but if the Colts come out of Baltimore 2-1, I may go buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it happening, but if it does, it's going to really because, like I said, there was a lot to take away from week one. That
Yep.
was a difficult opponent. Week two, we looked great. The Texans could potentially be in play for the Sacco this year. It's an allusion back to the league, the TV show. The Sacco was always given to the worst player in the league. I think the Texans very well could be the worst team in the NFL. So this is going to be a good litmus test of all right, we're swinging the pendulum back in the other direction. The Ravens are a very good football team. They're 2-0 and they just got done basically shutting down the best, if one of the best, if not the best, quarterback wide receiver duo in the NFL. And if the Colts can knock them off, maybe we have to reset expectations for this year.
Yeah, and it's really too. I want to like again. We'll get into our final score predictions here in a minute, but say the Colts do come out as with a loss, right, and go 1-2. Excuse me. I really want to see how the game progresses and the flow of the game, and a combination of how competitive we are with, did we really give them a fight, right? Did we go in and give them all 60 minutes worth of our payroll, if you will?
Yeah, yeah, and you could argue that they did that, that the Colts did that in Week 1 with the Jaguars. You know, they came up short, but that score looks, a lot. The differential there looks much bigger than what the actual game showed when we
Mm-hmm.
watched it live. So again, like you said, the Colts may not win this game. They probably won't win this game, but if they can come out and we know our defense is capable. We have 90% of our players, retention from last year in terms of production. Obviously we lost Gilly, but our defense is good. They were good last year. They're still good. So if we can come out and hang with the Ravens for this whole game, who's to say we're not going to pick off a few more of these games
Yeah.
down the road? It's hard to win on the road in the NFL, but you might have somebody come in, you know, like the Browns, who have kind of been back and forth so far this year. They had one good game, one horrible stinker, but that's a kind of team where they're probably more talented top to bottom than the Colts. But if they come in to Indianapolis and we're playing like we have against the Jaguars and hopefully against the Ravens, who knows? We might pick off a few of those
Anything
games.
can happen, man, any given Sunday. Well, I'm trying to think here. Final score predictions? Yeah, let's do it. Tell me what you got.
Yeah, so with all this rah rah, unfortunately, I got to go with a loss here for the Colts. I just think so. I've got them losing 20-10. I think that they, especially given the weather conditions, are going to struggle on offense because I think if the weather is working against us and takes away Gardner Minshew's ability to throw the ball more than 5-10 yards, that gives the Ravens the ability to just key in on the running game. And like we mentioned in our last episode, Zach Moss had every rushing attempt by a running back on the Colts last week. And if we have to rely on our running game for 4 quarters in the rain, it's not sustainable for him to get every
Nope.
carry, and it gives the Ravens the ability to just key in on the run game. And I think the Colts may struggle to move the ball in this game, given the Ravens have a top 10 defense. So given their ability and the weather conditions and our inability against the one good team that we played this year to move the ball in the run game, I think it just spells a lot of trouble. And it's to the Ravens, it's a rivalry game, so they're going to be fired up for it. And I think our defense will play well. I think if the Colts can hold, the Ravens offense to 15-20 in that range, that's a good game. I mean, you can win games holding teams to 20
Yeah,
points in the NFL.
absolutely.
But I just don't think our offense has the firepower in this matchup.
I agree with you there. I believe that this is going to be a kicker heavy game. I can foresee a lot of drives stalling out after midfield, which, given the weather conditions and how much rain is supposed to fall, as well as possible wind, yeah, that gives Justin Tucker the advantage. And Baltimore's an outside team. Colts are an inside team, or a dome team, if you will. And
Right.
but what's funny is the Colts have won a lot of adverse weather conditions. I immediately think of that snow game up in Buffalo several years back. That was just wild to
Yeah.
watch. But no, as for the game this Sunday, I think overall there's not going to be a lot of offense. Really, it's going to depict on special teams in the turnover battle. Can we keep the ball secure? Can Gardner Minshew avoid interceptions, which historically he's good at? But, you know, we just can't put the ball on the ground and give Baltimore those extra opportunities, especially in good field position. But ultimately, I do have Baltimore winning 19-13. So, a 6-point loss to Baltimore in crap conditions, I'll take it. But
Yeah, we're both pretty close. You got them covered, and I don't. It'll be interesting, and it could be the field goal could be the difference
it
there.
could,
But I think that's a great assessment because, like you said, Tucker can kick anywhere in any conditions. So it doesn't matter if it's 6 feet of snow. Somehow the guy will hit a 50-yarder. So I would agree. I think we're on kind of the same page in terms of the principles of what may happen. It'll be interesting to see if we can hold them to more field goals and keep ourselves in the game, or you know if we kind of let them run away with it on the offensive side of the ball
for
with
sure.
Lamar.
I, I'll be tuning in for sure. I mean, I watch. I mean,
Oh
love my Colts. I'm gonna watch every minute that I can. When I don't have two children absolutely needing me, because dad life. Let's go.
yeah, I'll be getting back tomorrow night at about 3 a.m. from the Ohio State Notre Dame game. But you bet your ass I'll be on there. Oh,
You're
sorry, I'm not
fine.
supposed to
Whatever.
cuss on this, but I will be in front of my TV at 1 p.m. watching our Colts, whether they suck it up or if they maybe come out and surprise us against the Ravens. I did have one more note, though, just to carry on our
Oh
commentator
no.
discussion. We got some positive feedback from last episode. So we are back, like you mentioned, we are back on CBS,
Yes,
so that's good
huge.
news. Bad news is our play-by-play is Beth Mowens and our color analyst is Jay Feely. So CBS doesn't care about us either. You might want to sync up the audio of Matt Taylor with the TV if you can, and just watch it on mute.
Look, I'm gonna give everybody a chance. I'm not gonna sit here and bash people I don't know, because I mean I've heard Jay Feely before. I mean he's hit or miss in my opinion, but
Well, Beth Mowens used to be an ESPN2 like noon college football game announcer, and it's. I'm sure she's great at what she does, but sometimes it's like listening, watching paint dry in audio via
no,
mute.
I'll tell
So
you what, it's much better than. Have you heard? I don't know if you listen to 1075 The Fan, but the Kevin and Query show, that the new
mhm.
replacement that came in alongside Kevin Bowen, I don't know his name, but that is nails on a chalkboard, my friend. No,
Hopefully, he doesn't listen to this because we just
yeah, I
made
know. I mean, bless up. Everyone's good. I'm not gonna sit here and judge everyone, but I just I feel like he needs to work on his presentation, if you will, because it kind of reminds me of a what am I? Oh, like a high school sports sort of table talk,
yeah,
if you will. Now,
watching a Westfield Noblesville game on Hamilton
oh
County
Lord,
television.
help. Which, by the way, that was tonight was our alma mater, if you will. It was their homecoming game. I think they got smoked by Brownsburg.
They got
Less than
murdered.
ideal,
Yeah, unfortunately.
but
We got one. We picked off one on the road last week against
we
Hamilton
we were
Southeastern, though, and
overdue
that was
for a big loss.
yeah,
So I mean, unfortunate to lose the
yeah.
homecoming game, but it is what it is. But I don't know. You got any last parting shots? I feel like we could throw in a couple things here and there, but I really don't have much tonight.
I got nothing else, man. Go Colts. I hope we show up. I hope Gardner throws 3 touchdowns and we're wrong about everything and we
Hey,
win the
I'm all
game.
about that. I will gladly come back on this and eat eat my words, eat my foot, eat my shorts, you name it. But
Yeah.
all right. But once again, everybody, thank you for taking some time to listen to us. I know we're just a bunch of couple idiots talking about Colts football. We're just fans, I promise you. But all right, Jordan, pleasure as always, my friend. We will catch you on the next one. Take care now. Bye bye then.
Undertaking the podcast is brought to you in part by Express Funeral Funding. Express Funeral Funding is the largest privately held and fastest, easiest at-need insurance assignment funding company in the nation. Their expert staff specialize in saving you and your staff time and money when it comes to handling life insurance assignments. Our friends at Express Funeral Funding are giving you the chance to win exclusive EFF merchandise just for listening to Undertaking the podcast. Simply like Express Funeral Funding on Facebook and then direct message them. The message, Undertaking the podcast, and you could win. It's just that easy. The Express Funeral Funding family is dedicated to serving you and your families during these challenging times and is sending a huge thank you to all of the last responders. So to learn more, visit expressfuneralfunding.com.